Halloween.
Okay, Linda.
Come on out.
Getting ready to be scared as I'm watching that. Flashbacks. I mean, at that time, with me is Irwin Yablans, who created the Halloween series. At that time, what made that film so different than the other Fright films?
Well, to begin with, if you had told me in 1978 that I'd be sitting here in 2012, sitting across from you discussing this movie, I would never have believed it possible. The movie was pretty much, and the book describes that. If you look at the subtext, how a bit of inspiration and desperation created the movie that changed Hollywood. That's quite it. I mean, I was desperate for some success with my new company, Compass International Pictures, and I was trying very hard to find a movie for a young filmmaker named John Carpenter, who was a student at USC and had just made a small student film that I had seen called Siege, and I had retitled it and called it Assault on Precinct 13. I recognized his talent, and I wanted to make a movie with him really badly because I knew that the studios would eventually find him. This was the days of the studio system, and the moguls hadn't really paid much attention to independent filmmakers. But I knew they'd catch up with this guy.
Right, but even the challenge for an independent filmmaker at that time was getting your movie viewed at theaters, right? Because a lot of theaters were owned or controlled
but that was my expertise. See, that was my expertise. I had spent many, many years before I had a career at Paramount and Warner Brothers. I was sales manager at Paramount Pictures, so I had a very, very broad knowledge of the sales and distribution situation.
What does the sales manager at Paramount Pictures do?
Oh, well, you're responsible for placing all of the pictures into all of the theaters in those days.
So you had those contacts?
Oh yeah, well you have all the major exhibition chains. It's sort of an incestuous relationship. There's a bunch of exhibitors that have theaters, and there are a bunch of distributors that make movies, and they work in a symbiosis that it's ongoing and constant. It isn't as difficult as you think when you have major companies, because the channels of distribution are kind of set up, and you're always doing this. It's very much the way it is today. But what was missing was the independent filmmaker and the independent distribution situation. What made my situation unique, and answer your question, is this. When Halloween was finished, and I knew I had a really good movie, I thought, well, gee, I'll show it to the major companies, and maybe I can make some real money and get my money back before I even go out with it.
You're going to flip it.
Yeah. So I had a big preview in Westwood, and I took a chance because that's where UCLA is, and you get a lot of hypercritical kids that can really ruin your movie.
A lot who are film students.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we played the picture, and the picture was just, Halloween just was everything I hoped for. For a little while I got scared because towards the end of the movie there was all this tittering and laughing, and people were shouting at the screen, and one girl yelled out after Jamie Lee dropped a knife for the 14th time or 15th time, "You bitch, you deserve to die." Nobody from the studios had sent nobody to see the movie. That shows you the mindset at the time.
They're ignoring it. Yeah.
So I decided there was only one thing left to do. I would distribute the picture myself, which I did. Now this is a movie we made for $300,000. Actually, it was $325, counting the money we paid Donald Pleasance, because I wanted that man in the movie. So
he got $25,000 for doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jamie Lee Curtis got
almost
scaled.
nothing. She got, and John Carpenter got $10,000, but I gave him 10% of the profits, which he probably threw in a drawer and forgot about.
Right.
But not anymore. I think he.
What kind of money did the Halloween one gross in those days?
Well over 50 million.
Which in today's dollars is what, 300-400 million.
Yeah, and of course there have been 8 sequels after that, and of course John Carpenter had 10%. You do the math. He's done it very, very well. But the big problem was now that I decided I was going to take the picture out, and in the book I describe how difficult it was to get bookings at first. But well, first I should tell you that one of the things about the movie that was unique was when I first saw the film in its answer print form, that is before the music and sound effects had been added. I knew we had a good movie, but I didn't know it was going to be as good as it turned out till after I heard the music. John Carpenter did that incredible, iconic score, which I think is one of the greatest scores ever written for a movie. And he did it all by himself on a Moog synthesizer. And he composed it, he played the music, and it all goes under the title on the screen, the Bowling Green Symphony Orchestra. That's him. You know?
But is music more important in that genre of a film than any other genre? I mean, because you can sense, I mean, the music starts to build and you're starting to feel yourself scared before anything even happens.
Yeah, I think it is. Every movie is enhanced by music, and music makes a lot. Some movies are actually, you can detract from them by too much music. But in horror films, you've got these are cues, these are stingers that signal to the audience. You know, this movie was designed when I hired John Carpenter to do this picture. I said, John, I want this to be theater of the mind. I'm the last of the radio generation. I grew up with Inner Sanctum and Lights Out, and to my way of thinking, the horror that you conjure up in your own mind is infinitely more frightening than anything you might see.
And you learned that from radio. You had to visualize internally whatever your thoughts were.
Yeah, we didn't have a television set in my home in Brooklyn until I was 15 years old. So that left a great impression on me. But having said that, the music, if you remember radio, the music played a really important part in radio because you had the organ, you had the stingers, you had the fade-ins and fade-outs of music. So the music in Halloween is designed...
Yep.
Damn it.
Oh, scaring me.
We're taped, thank goodness.
No, it's great. That's okay. But we're talking about...
You know, actually, my wife has one with the ringtones from Halloween.
Does she?
Yeah.
Can you play that? The Halloween ringtone?
No, I don't have it. She does.
Oh, okay. Well, you can't pull
The reason I don't have it is we never know whose phone it was.
I mean, you're a fascinating man to talk to, but when you were growing up, your life was a little bit different. You grew up very in a very lower economic poor. Okay, you're a poor family out in New York.
It's an old story by now.
But you had a learning disability at the same time.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing. My parents made a terrible mistake with me.
Is it like dyslexia or something like that?
Well, you know, today I don't know what they'd call it, ADD, or I described in the book how today this whole family of apology would come up with some. I used to read voraciously as a child, but yet I was failing desperately behind in my schoolwork. That could be because my parents started me in school when I was 4 years old. They lied about my age, so to speak. And I didn't even go into kindergarten, I went to first grade. They were very poor people. My father was a taxi driver. I suppose they wanted to...
Daycare. It was free daycare.
Pretty much. That's a great way to put it. And it set me on a course that I never could quite get away. I could never catch up.
You couldn't catch up. You always felt like you were behind the ball.
Yeah. In high school, they used to give me tests almost every week after school because they thought there was something either wrong with their IQ tests or I was cheating. Because I would score very, very high, and then I would go out and fail everything. But once I found something I wanted to do, I achieved what I set out to do.
And that was scaring millions of people. And after you created Halloween 1, I think we have a scene here, or a clip from Halloween 2.
Yeah.
Now you had a formula. Let's take a look at this.
Who is it?
There was nothing within him, neither conscience nor reason, that wasn't even remotely human.
Some kind of a joke? I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight.
You don't know what death is.
Mr. Garrett were having trouble with the phones.
There is no place to hide. He will always find you.
What's this? It's a Celtic word. It means the Lord of the Dead.
Mr. Garrett?
You know, we were talking about the music. Sometimes you can use music to fool people. They think something's going to happen, but nothing happens.
Well, it's all about manipulate. Horror films are really good when you manipulate the audience. That's what I told John when we made the first one, and the second one. He did not direct the second one, by the way.
Who has directed the second one?
A fellow named Rosenthal.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is very complex, but basically Dino De Laurentiis saw Halloween and called,
Mm-hmm.
He was a friend, I knew him from my days at Paramount. And Dino loved to nurture young filmmakers. When he saw it gets back to what happened was this movie, Halloween, revolutionized the industry in that suddenly they became aware of the independent filmmaker. I remember when we had a big meeting of all the young people that had helped me distribute this picture, and they wanted to give me a big send-off and thank me for making them all wealthy and assuring their future. And I said, fellas, it's all over. Forget about it. You think the major studios are going to sit around and let me get away with this? They're all going to get in this business now. And then you had Friday the 13th and Terror, so they all jumped on.
Right.
Now, Dio De Laurentiis called me and said, he used to talk in this very thick Italian accent. I want to do a picture with John Carpenter. Anyway, he offered me quite a bit of money for just allowing him to make the second picture.
Right.
So I had a little meeting with my partners, and we all agreed. I think we got $2 million to just let him make it. Well, $2 million without any effort seemed like an awful lot of money in 1978,
Sure.
79.
Yeah.
So we made a mistake. We never should have done that. And so we allowed Dino De Laurentiis to make number 2 and number 3. And if we were involved creatively, but he controlled it. And then it was released through Universal Pictures, actually. But when we got back to Halloween 4, we took back the rights. We realized what we had by that time.
And Jamie Lee Curtis at the time was, what, 19, you told me?
She was somewhere between 18 and 19 years old.
Yeah.
It was John Carpenter who called me one day when we were casting and said, Irwin, I think I found somebody you should look at to play Laurie Strode. So I went down to meet her, but in the back of my mind, I had another motive. Her mother, of course, was Janet Leigh, Father Tony Curtis, but Janet Leigh, of course, had started Psycho. And I had this thought about having Janet Leigh in that shower scene, photographed next to this new little girl, her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, in our movie, and sort of borrow that reflected glory. And actually, my idea was to break AP and UPI, which were important press releases those days, and we did all over the world.
They picked up the nuance of
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
And I couldn't possibly, publicity is much more valuable than advertising, and it's free.
What's been the scariest film that you've ever seen?
Well, the models for the models for Halloween, in answer to your question, are those movies: Psycho,
Right.
Hitchcock's Psycho,
Right.
and Billy Friedkin's Exorcist. I remember seeing The Exorcist.
Which part of The Exorcist scared you the most?
The scene that exemplifies what we did with this picture, Halloween, when you walk up the stairs and you see nothing.
Right.
You just walk up the stairs and walk up the stairs and walk up the stairs. Once you're inside, hell breaks loose, and it's effective. But the real terror, Hitchcock did it as well. When Martin Balsam walks up the stairs.
The anticipation?
Yeah, the anticipation. The anticipation is far more frightening than the reality, and that's what Halloween was modeled like. Those were my instructions to John. And by the way, I dare say if someone were to do that today, that formula properly, it would be as big a hit as it ever was.
What's your feeling about the horror films today? I mean, this time of the year, you always have a half a dozen coming out.
I hate them.
Some of them are comedies.
Well, for one thing, the ones I hate the most, the comedies I can bear.
Right.
They're silly, but at least they're watchable. But it's the school of sadomasochism that really frightens me.
You think it's a little bit too gory, and there's not enough of the theater of imagination?
Absolutely. And what scares me even more about it is that it has an audience. People's shock value, you know, movies, I guess, reflect our culture. And if that is true, and you see movies that resort to horrible torture and sadomasochism, and if audiences want to pay to see that and seem to enjoy it, what does that say about our society?
We have time to talk about the message. I wanted to talk a few minutes about that. You did a film a long time ago.
Yeah.
Where, as a result of the film, the hostages were taken by Muslims.
Yeah.
And
that was a very interesting part of my life. And really, that was the genesis of Halloween.
Right. So you want to tell the story quickly? I think we have about a minute and a half left.
You want me to tell you this?
Yeah.
The financing for Halloween came from a man named Mustafa Akkad, who became my partner in Compass. I got a call from Rogers and Cowan. They were a big PR firm, and they wanted me to see a movie called The Message, directed by a fellow named Mustafa Akkad. He was a Syrian. It was the story of the Prophet Muhammad with Anthony Quinn, Irene Yablans. Big movie. It looked like Lawrence of Arabia. Couldn't get distribution for a variety of reasons. I saw the movie and I just loved it. I wanted to meet Mustafa, and we had a meeting, and I told him, Mustafa, I'd love to distribute this movie, but I haven't got the resources. Long story short, he put up the money for distribution, and I took the picture to New York. While we were opening the movie at the Rivoli Theater, the Hanafi Muslim fanatics, which I knew nothing about Islam at that time.
Well, this is before terrorism was an issue in this country.
1972.
Yeah, right.
And
before the Arab oil embargo even.
Oh,
it was 74.
The average American, if you mentioned a Muslim, he would think Abbott and Costello and Alibaba or something like that. And so the hostages crisis went on for 3 or 4 days. They threatened to kill people and cut their heads off. They had the B'nai B'rith headquarters in Washington, D.C. as hostage.
And they wanted you to stop
showing
the film.
movie. The mayor of Washington, D.C., Mayor Washington, by the way, that was his name. He called me and said, "How you must stop." So I went on television and I actually spoke to the world, and I spoke to those Hanafi Muslims in particular that yes, we're in the interest of safety, we're going to stop the movie, and we did stop it for 3 days. Once the hostage crisis was alleviated, I put the picture back. Mayor Washington called me again. He said, "How could you do it?" I said, "This is the United States of America." I said, "You," and I was scared, by the way. But I am not going to let a bunch of fanatics stop us from showing a beautiful movie.
Right. Well, you have a story like Salman Rushdie has.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Well, that's why believe me, we can go on and on about that. I had some insight into the Muslim situation long before anybody else. I was worried about my family because I knew that by that time that Muslims, when they take out a fatwa, when they decide that they're going to kill somebody, it may take 10 years, but they try to do it.
This man has lived a fascinating life. It's a great story. The name of the book is The Man Who Created Halloween. You can read about all these issues and a whole lot more. I mean, we haven't even touched on your brother, who ran movie studios at one time, and the competition, and between you guys, and how you both came from nothing and becoming very successful. Irwin Yablans, the man who created Halloween.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. I think he'll come back.
Exploring uncharted territory.
Totally charted. Just talk.